Hello and welcome back. We're still with the Scottish Greens, although we will speak to other politicians over the next couple of weeks. So tonight we have Ariane Burgess, who is the MSP for Highlands and Islands. And as with our previous chat to Laura, we covered a huge amount of topics.
Just covered a lot of ground in the discussion. It also kind of struck me that both of them, Laura and Ariane, cover an immense amount of ground as they go around campaigning around their regions, because it's the south of Scotland and the Highlands and Islands. They're on the go all the time. It's fantastic.
We had a little bit of a technical issue with one of our headphones during this episode. I have done my best to clean up the audio, but if you hear a little bit of clicking and scratching in the background, it's not you, it's us, and we'll get it fixed for next time.
So enough of us. Let's bring Ariane in.
The campaign is just getting going. What are you feeling right now? What are you finding? What are you hearing?
Well, I'm really delighted that I now have time to focus on the campaign 24/7 for the next few weeks. And so that's really great. I have already been going out to the doors actually for weeks now. And I would say that the main thing that people are struggling with is the cost of living. And that is something that the Greens are focusing on, where we have been focusing on it actually throughout the previous session in the Parliament. And that's something we're planning to take forward. So the work that we've done on the bus, the free bus travel, and now we've got this £2 bus cap across the whole of the Highlands and Islands region, which I'm really excited about because that's my region, the region I've been representing, and I'm excited to see how that impacts people's pockets and really helps people be able to actually make choices about the journeys they want to make rather than the cost of that journey.
I think the travel for the under 22s and over 60s like us, it's wonderful. I mean, I've got a son who's 33 and on minimum wage, and he's going, why have I got to pay? And I thought free public transport would be a wonderful place to get to. Do you think we'll get there?
Well, I hope so. I mean, that is actually one of the things that we are campaigning on for this election, is actually rolling out free bus travel for everyone. Because yes, absolutely. I actually just became someone who got their free bus pass, and it's a game changer.
It's wonderful, isn't it?
It's amazing. Yeah. So a few weeks ago, I made a local journey here, and it cost me £12.90 return. And now I can make that same journey for free. But other people can make that journey for £4 return. So it is amazing, because it is that piece of like, wow, Scotland really opens up. And yes. I remember actually for the campaign in 2021, I was actually making videos about the free bus travel. And for young people under 22, what that means in terms of the ability to get to work without losing a whole chunk of the money that they've actually been earning, or to get to studies, to college, or to go out and socialize. It's a real game changer. And when I'm at the doors talking to people, families, the parents of kids that can use those bus passes, they are really delighted about the fact that if they've got 2 or 3 kids in the family, that's a huge difference in terms of being able to choose other ways in which they spend that money that they've saved from the travel.
Do you think it would be possible to get for everyone without nationalising the buses?
Well, I think this pilot is showing that we can do that. We've got this £2 pilot. It's not free yet, but the £2 pilot is a mix of different types of bus services. So public and private services are all involved in that £2 bus cap. So that's taking us in the right direction. I would like to see our bus services nationalised. It's something that the Greens have been calling for. We've got this fantastic example of Lothian buses, and I grew up in Edinburgh, and I was able to make use of those buses when I was a kid going to school, and it would be fantastic to see a nationalised bus service across Scotland and coordinated and joined up, and one ticket where you can get on a bus and then get on a train and then get on a ferry. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Like in every other European city, that would be really, really good to see early in this new Parliament. What would you like to see being taken forward?
Well, a few things. One is what can we do about the free bus travel? That's what we've been talking about. But the childcare piece as well. I feel that is so urgent for people in the Highlands and Islands whether on an island like Tiree or in Strontian. I've had conversations with people all over the region where there's different issues with childcare. And it's not just about the cost of it. In rural communities, it is about actually being able to deliver it because of certain regulations. So that's something that I would love to get busy with early on and sort that out, because communities are kind of being very, very creative around how they solve the childcare issues. And I would like it to be less hurdles and less having to tie themselves up in knots, and actually be something that's very straightforward. People in rural communities often play many, many roles. So it's not only is it about getting back into work, but it could also be about being on a board of directors for one of the community companies or volunteering in other ways. So we really have to get the childcare piece sorted out for rural communities. And I think something that I'm really proud of in our manifesto is that it's something I saw quite early on is in the previous session, is that we really need to be designing for rural and island communities first, because those are the difficult conundrums. Some people use the phrase wicked problem. Those are the challenging areas to solve in terms of public services and meeting people's needs. And in the meantime, we've also got this really challenging situation around depopulations of people leaving the communities, leaving the Highlands and Islands, leaving other rural areas of Scotland and heading to the Central Belt or other cities, Inverness. So if we solve those issues in those places first, then urban is going to be easy. So that I would like us to, and often it's the other way around. Often government tends to tackle things that are the low-hanging fruit in a way. The Parliament and the government actually has a duty to tackle depopulation in Scotland. It's written into legislation now, so it really needs to be a priority.
And is housing still a big issue?
Absolutely. So housing is something that was when I got elected, I looked at the region. I thought, gosh, it's a big region to cover, and I decided to go on a strategic. What is something that is an issue across every single part of the Highlands and Islands? And it was housing, affordable housing. So some of the things that I did, one of them was the Greens, while we were in government, we had it in our manifesto to get funding for these housing bodies. They're called housing enablers. They're organizations that know the ropes of how to support communities to actually bring housing about. And we had in our manifesto a commitment to get them funding. So I became a squeaky wheel. And when we finally got a housing minister, Paul McClellan, I said, Paul, we need to do this. And the government put together an arrangement with Nationwide Foundation and the government part funding. And these two organizations had to bid into the funding. So it wasn't just, here's the money, get on with it. They had to bid in and propose what they were going to do. But we had a housing enabler body, Communities Housing Trust in the north. In the south of Scotland, it was South of Scotland Community Housing. So both of them bid in for that funding. And that's crucial funding because they need that funding to support communities to get to a point where they're ready to take on £1 million mortgages and things like that. So these enablers don't get funded for that bit. So it was so important that the government supported that. And as a result, there's now a pipeline of 1,700 houses getting ready to be built. And that might not seem like a lot in the amount that we're needing to bring forward for the whole of Scotland, but for communities, 1 or 2 flats or houses in a community that a family can move into, or young people can stay in, or older people can downsize into, freeing up a bigger house, that is a massive game changer. So I'm really chuffed that that's something that we've been able to do. And it's interesting, it's like sometimes it's not the £20 million or the £1 billion for rural communities. It can be a few £1 million that spread across the region that makes the difference in terms of that depopulation issue.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly sounds like a huge number to me of houses, because I live somewhere there's 1,000 houses in my village. So, I could just imagine that would make a huge impact if you spread it across.
Is it the kind of strategy and setup does it work as a kind of pump primer that it's easier to carry on doing it after that? I mean, either or maybe just because communities get more confident about what they can take on?
I think some communities have kind of had their hands held by enablers. Some communities have gone on their own and have been successful. Some communities have gone on their own and have not been successful. So having their hand held can be helpful. And I would say that we're kind of in the early days of this type of approach. Once a community gets some housing done, they might stick with these enablers to get the next project, because there's so many nuances. And one of the things that the enablers do, and it's so exciting to me, the communities they're taking forward the housing project, but they will be doing it with partners. So they'll take forward the housing project. We've got examples where a housing association in the Highlands and Islands will come on board and say, we'll take one of those units for to meet the needs that we have to meet. But so the housing association might not necessarily take the building for construction forward. Community does it, and the housing association comes in, or the council comes in, or in some cases there might be a situation where it's not just housing. There's one on Skye where it's housing, it's offices, and also an NHS surgery. And so the NHS come in to rent that space.
Yeah.
It's really brilliant.
Yeah,
it sounds great. And fun enough, we don't hear very much about that, do we, in the mainstream media?
There are 4 episodes on my podcast for Generative Scotland from a few years ago now. They're a bit old, but they're great episodes because I'm talking to some of the people that brought forward the housing and the challenges they faced. Community-led housing is so important because they're leading on it. But what we need is, and there's another thing I'll be working on, is the barriers and the blocks that they have to leap over from various public agencies. Like there's something in the system at the moment that the public bodies tend to think communities somehow are lesser. They're not as competent as a private organization, as a construction company. But actually the communities will be hiring and getting advice from people who know what they're doing, right? They're just the lead body. So I really want to see something where Transport Scotland, Scottish Water, and so on and so forth really recognise that this is volunteer-run boards that really know what they're doing, really care about their communities, and we need to get rid of some of the red tape that they make communities leap through, cut through, whatever the metaphor is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Leslie Riddick's always focusing on how small local democracy is so much more powerful than centralized democracy. And that kind of scenario you're describing, a constituency the size that you've got, how much easier would it be if it was smaller? Is there benefit in it being big? What do you think?
I actually believe it needs to be smaller. And so independence is an incredibly important thing. That's what we want. I'm immensely grateful that we've got the devolution part and we've got a parliament. I don't know how people got their needs met in Scotland before we had the parliament, because we had, 59 MPs or something going to Westminster out of 650. Like, how on earth could Scotland have ever been heard? How on earth could have all of the island communities each with their unique, nuanced issues, how could they have ever been heard when there's only, I think, maybe 1 or 2 constituencies in England that have islands? So islands is very, very specifically Scottish. So I am really delighted that we have a Scottish Parliament, but being there now for 5 years, I now talk about Scotland being a nation of islands rather than an island nation, and that actually, yes, devolving power to the most local sphere is really important, because just with the islands alone, no island is the same. They're all unique. They've all got very different issues. Yes, you can say, oh, they all need ferries and things like that. But even with the ferries have to be different. The landscapes are different. Even Lewis and Harris, you've got Harris, which is mostly rocky and more altitude, and then Lewis, that's basically peatland. They're joined together, but they're different, and it brings out different issues. So yeah, I mean, I had 2 for the last 5 years. I had 2 North Stars because it was really hard to pick, and one of them was tackling the depopulation, so keeping the population in place, and the other was about how can we move the blocks and the barriers and allow decision making at the most local, especially in the face of the climate and nature emergency. I think communities need to be given power. We saw how communities got that power during COVID, and I was involved in that. and it was incredibly freeing, and communities just ran because they knew what needed to be done, and it took longer for other formal organizations to get up to speed. And I think that's going to be the same with climate and nature. We're not really taking that seriously enough, and we need to give communities power to make more decisions, be more resilient.
Scotland and Highlands and Islands, maybe even more so, is owned by so few people. You know, the land isn't really ours. It's those sorts of aspirations get bogged down.
The aspirations for more local decision making.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think they do. I mean, we made a little bit of progress in the last session with the land reform. Now it's an act, and that's going to require landowners with a certain over 1,000 hectares of land. They're going to be required to write land management plans that they have to engage the community on. It was quite frustrating, that process, though, because I tried to get an amendment into that legislation to say that they actually had to act on the plan. And so at the moment they have to create a plan, they have to include the community in the discussions around that plan, but don't necessarily have to carry out the plan, which the argument was made by the government that things change and they can't, you might have more extreme weather or something like that, and the plan no longer becomes relevant. But I think the good part is that communities are being engaged. And I will say that if anyone threatens the Scottish Land Commission, I will be the first to be in there defending them, because I think that organisation is incredible, the work that they do. And something that they helped me understand is that, when I was growing up in Scotland, I didn't think I didn't have any power on what happened on the land, and didn't have any power even on the sea or anything to do with what is Scotland. And the Land Commission has helped me understand that I might not own the land, but I can have a say on what happens because it's in the public interest. So I think that they're doing really important work, and I think they're helping inch us towards more community land ownership. But right now we're sitting at, I think it's 3% of Scotland's land is community owned land. So we've got a long way to go. And I will say, having just talked about the housing, community-led housing, we have to find a way to make sure that it's not all of a burden that's on community volunteer groups. We need to get to a place where whatever size of local authority we have, there's much more facilitation and support for communities to actually lead on what they know they need to be leading on.
Yeah, that makes sense. We were involved right from the beginning with the consultation. We seem to be discussing much more exciting ideas back then than have actually ended up in the bill. And I dare say that happens a lot with legislation. But the one that really burns me, that I really wish we could do something with, is some kind of maximum on how much land one individual can own. Because if you look at the huge estate owners and, what's his name, Anders Paulsen, or the sheer amount of our land that one individual has is just ridiculous, out of all proportion to, you talk about equality and the lack of equality, and that is just staring us in the face. And then the other issue with that, we covered, I think, again, about a year ago, one of the islands, my brain's telling me Great Cymru, but I might have got that wrong. And it was where the owner of the island, there was an owner who was beneficial and the community loved him, and then he died and was replaced by an absentee landlord's son.
I think it was Great.
Was it Bernary?
It was the island off the west side of Lewis, and that's right. He just ignored what anyone wanted. He refused to be in any sort of contact or dialogue.
And the islanders were trying to use some obscure bit of legislation to force him to act. You thought, why is it so difficult? This would originally have been their land until somebody came along and took it.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm with you on the limiting the amount of land, and there's probably some difficult legal reasons that need to be worked out as to how we would go about that. But I agree. I mean, Anders Paulsen is busy buying up estates, so he doesn't have one big estate in Sutherland. He's got lots of estates, but cumulatively he owns most of the north of Scotland. And I've spoken to communities, the people who live there, and there are mixed views. Some people are going along with his vision of what he wants, this kind of environmental, ecological restoration project to be. But there are others who feel, while they're sympathetic with the idea of ecological restoration and rewilding, they feel like they have absolutely no say on how it's coming about, and they feel like they're being put into some kind of ecological natural environment Disney World, where it's all about a look and feel for the guests that he's going to invite. So I've been working with them, trying to find ways to actually, maybe they need to come on your podcast. I mean, that's the thing, isn't there? There's such a connection between us wanting independence for Scotland and us as a country being able to make our own decisions. It's so tied to land reform and land ownership and communities being able to make their own decisions. So they're very, very connected.
I heard a great phrase, and I think it was when one of the Revive Coalition conferences. You hear people talk about labour and capital as if they're the two things that matter. He said, actually, there's three. It's labour, capital and land. And I thought, we don't think that way. And see Gresham House, the second biggest landowner in Scotland. It's a foreign-owned, London-based asset management company. I mean, if we become independent and then we found, well, actually, we've sold most of our land to Gresham House, how does that help us any?
Yes, well, that's right. It is concerning that Gresham House has bought on behalf of their investors, right? They're doing it on behalf of lots of different people, but yes, they're in the mix there. It is concerning. But I will say that I was there at that Revive conference, and yes, it was great that land was brought into the mix around that piece around real power. And I think that is something that absolutely needs to be in the conversation, because if you own the land, you then have the power to decide you're going to build houses or you're going to set up some kind of infrastructure, some kind of, I would like to think communities at this point get it, that whatever industry that they bring about is something that actually works with nature rather than against it, but something that actually helps the community thrive. We have to get away from the extractive model. And if we look at Scotland from the time of the clearances, really, or before, but that was the beginning of it. It's like clear people off, bring in sheep, extract the wealth from the wool that was sold for uniforms in armies, like military campaigns and things like that. So whatever it is, sheep, then deer, whatever there is, you see mines and quarries and smelters and various things across rural Scotland, but it's all extracting it for the wealth of an individual who potentially doesn't actually live in Scotland. So community ownership of land means that we could actually get busy with the community wealth building commitment that we've made through the community wealth building bill. That's a kind of signal that that's a direction we want to be going in. So it does mean we need to own more of the land so that we can actually get that circular economy, keeping the wealth local, keeping it in people's pockets, many more inclusive and democratic organizations and businesses like cooperatives. I would love to see those flourish, social enterprise, community benefit companies, that kind of thing. So, but yes, having land is the foundation of all of that.
Yeah, it's a sort of key, isn't it? And then and then another one that gets brought into it, if you've got ownership of more of the land, is community energy. We just need to move more into that. Well, we had a chat with Craig Dale. We'll talk about a lot of things, but one thing was community benefits. But it went over onto, yes, there's community benefits, but actually you need community ownership as well. I mean, so you need both of those. And I mean, presumably that's just another part of trying to get a more circular economy working, well, up in the Highlands and Islands, but actually in Scotland in general.
So there's a few things around community energy. So yeah, definitely community benefit is too low, and so that needs to be higher, but it only benefits a few communities that have that wind farm nearby. Community ownership would mean actually a stake in deciding the location, the scale, and that kind of thing, and far more income generated into the community. And then there's the idea of the community wealth fund, so some kind of fund that comes from a collective payment that would then go to communities, like communities in Glasgow could apply to that fund. Because we need to find money to come into all of our what are known as third sector community organizations that are doing incredible work in parallel to the things, the public services that are being offered. So yes, renewable energy is a game changer. There's some fantastic examples across my region. So Galson Trust in Lewis, in the north of Lewis, they've got 3 wind turbines. From the back of that, they've been able to do incredible projects. They employ, well, when I spoke to them last specifically about this, they were employing 26 local people who were then running various projects, meeting lots of needs for the community. And they were about to embark on doing their own housing project. So incredibly vibrant. And then in Yale, you have a community, the community trust there has 5 wind turbines, and they've done things like redevelop the harbour. That harbour is, it's amazing. The harbour is a place where a lot comes into that harbour from the fishing sector and the aquaculture sector, and also others. And so they've modernized it and made it look great, and they own it, and so they take they charge for the use of that. So it's incredibly brilliant if they've got wind farms. So now what we're looking at is these much bigger scale companies coming in and doing big scale wind farms. And what we want to see is how can communities actually get a share in a big wind farm and then be able to do that kind of incredible infrastructural stuff. Because again, I think when we got a parliament, we inherited an incredibly underinvested country. The rails are underinvested, the ferries, the ports, all that underinvested. Here, you have all of this, govern it, make the decisions about it, but it had been historically underinvested in. So we need to find ways to bring money into it. And now that we're out of the EU, so that was one of the ways that we did get, at one point I wanted to do a project where I got everybody to crowdsource photographs, where everybody in their neighborhood took a photograph of the EU stars on a project, like a bridge or a building or a bit of road or whatever it was, a community centre, because we were so well supported by the EU in Scotland, and especially in the Highlands and Islands, and we've lost that benefit. So we have to find another way, and renewable energy has so much potential.
That point you made about the communities keeping the wealth there, it's almost all we have to do is stop letting it being extracted, because once the communities get the use of it, they're not trying to cream off a profit for shareholders and foreign pension schemes and wherever it goes to. It just seems to make more sense to keep it.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is moving away from the extractive model, and one that is more regenerative, generative, about caring for the community and really building that community wealth.
So Ardrossan Harbour is an example of that. It's been privately owned since it was taken over, starting during Mrs. Thatcher's time and still into, the Labour government in the 90s. Privately owned, taken the profits out, never invested in it. Now bits of it had to be closed for safety reasons. And then I read the Scottish Tories are, complaining that ScotGov isn't being fast enough in taking Ardrossan back into public hands.
I think this is the example, again, of the extractive model. This is not a Ardrossan Harbour example, but there's a local example to me, which is actually a mobile home park. It's a park that there's a lot of people that live there. And I was brought into it because my constituents were getting in touch about a terribly awful sewage system that is in that mobile home park, and the owner's not doing anything about it. And what came to light through working and looking into it was that basically this is a piece of land somebody set up years ago for these mobile homes. They set it up, they sold it off, made a profit, and then it just seems to be that that's what's going on, is that whoever buys it is adding some more mobile homes and then selling it. So they're just flipping it and making a profit, but they're not actually doing anything about the infrastructure. So these poor residents are having to live with this horrific stench while these other people are making money. So fortunately, we have finally managed to get the council to deal with it. But it is this example. I think could probably find countless examples where parts of Scotland are just being used to extract wealth for private individuals. So it's one thing, right? It's kind of like we need independence, but we need more community ownership. We need more cooperatives. We need more collective ownership and decision making about things. And I don't think that's necessarily going to happen overnight. I lived in New York City for a long time, and I came back. And one of the things that brought me back was that I could still feel within Scotland's social and cultural fabric, community. I could feel it, right? There's a natural thing here. And actually, I've got friends that are taking sabbaticals, and they're in Edinburgh at the moment from New York City. And they're just like, wow, the community feeling is so amazing here, right? So it's palpable, but I think we have lost it. We're losing it. Like, I've just been doing some work with, there's some housing, what are they called? They're not housing associations, they're community-led housing groups. And we used to have many of them in Scotland. They came into the fore in the 70s and 80s. They've dwindled now to just 7. And only 5 of them remaining are fully mutual, meaning that everyone gets a say, everyone gets to be involved. But I've been doing some work with them and the Scottish Housing Regulator, because the regulator has all these kind of difficult hoops that don't quite fit the model for these community-led housing bodies. So just a matter of communication to iron those things out. Looks like we're going to hopefully help them, and hopefully set the pathway to have more opportunities for more housing cooperatives and community-led of that kind of scale of housing. So I think we need more training. I don't know where that fits in schools and high schools around collective ownership, collective community doing things together, because we so much with social media and that direction of travel has pushed us into the extractive model and the consumer model, and we need to kind of bring the skills that are, I think, clearly innate in Scotland to the fore, and validate them for people.
Yeah. So if we're independent, it wouldn't be easy, because you have got to overcome people's own assumptions about what works best and what doesn't. But if we were independent, at least we'd have a better chance of doing all that. But then there's the getting independent. So if we move on to that, because if the polling, if it happens the way it's saying, it does look like there'll be a pretty substantial majority of Indies supporting MSPs in Holyrood. How do you feel about that? Because Fiona and I don't really understand why Mr. Swinney and people who do the manifesto kind of decisions in the SNP have come out with this. We need an overall majority. We had it last time, and that's why we got the referendum. I think that is a fallacy, actually. I think that initial premise is just not true, and I don't think it actually works like that. But nevertheless, they've done it, they've said it, it's what they're campaigning on. So what do you think, given that, let's assume there'll be an overall majority of independents supporting MSPs. You make moves towards Westminster, and Mr. Starmer goes, no. So what do you think yourselves kind of going to unfold from post this election?
The $1 million question.
Yeah, I know you're asking to look into the crystal ball here.
I know.
But I think there's a few things there. One is, how long is Keir Starmer going to be around? Yeah. I mean, really?
Really,
right? Yeah. And I think another thing is that people in Scotland really need to think carefully about any kind of Reform UK coming into the Scottish Parliament, because that will be a signal to whatever happens south of the border. And right now, what's happening south of the border is that who's in the running is the Green Party of England and Wales and Reform UK. And so if we get the Green Party of England and Wales running Westminster, then I'm pretty sure there would be an opportunity for independence to come about in Scotland. They've got work to do, but they are definitely up there with Reform now, and given that Labour is pretty much collapsing, they may come back. They had this kind of weird comeback in the general election, and then have completely collapsed since then, because they're clearly failing the people. They've gone back on so many things that they promised and that they would carry out. So that's one bit, is who is going to be running Westminster. If it's Reform UK, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to get anywhere near any kind of independence. I think they'll hang on to us. Why? Because of what we've been talking about, the extractive model, extracting the wealth that Scotland has. the other piece for me is really about having conversations with people on the door. So I was very, very involved in the first referendum, not the first one, but in 2014. And got very busy in Murray. It was where I first learned to canvass and go and talk to people at the doors. I absolutely love talking to people at the doors. You know, whether they agree with me or not, it's so great to go out and hear what people have to say and what people are concerned about. So we've had that poll that's come out that has pushed the percentage up. We're getting 50% saying yes. So that's great. And I think we just need to keep being out there and having those conversations and making the case and taking really listening to the people who are worried, who are feared about taking this big step. But more and more the case is being made. I've just spent 5 years watching situations where we couldn't carry out our own bits of legislation, like the deposit return scheme. That was maybe one of the first times we realized, oh right, actually we are on this leash with Westminster and we aren't free. And the other thing that I think about is somebody could decide, Reform or whoever, Nigel Farage, if they're in power, they could decide, all right, we're done with this devolution, let's get rid of it. And we've already seen, and we have talked today about what we lost coming out of the EU, what we would lose if we lost the devolved parliament would be horrific. It would be horrendous. It would be tragic, because there's no way that what's going on in Westminster and the decisions that made there can really meet the needs of what's happening in Scotland. And the other thing I'll come back to is also the community element. What we tend to decide on for policies, and this is why I wish more people understood, it's like Westminster decides what they want to do in England, and then they give Scotland, through the Barnett consequentials, the same amount of money to do the same thing in Scotland. But we don't want to do it that way. We want to do it differently. So, that means that there's not money for other things. But what I'm really proud of in Scotland is that we are looking out for the community. And we recognise that we must look after the most vulnerable people so that they have a good start and they're supported in life to be part of Scotland's culture and society and contribute and have a good life, a good quality of life. So I think we do need independence. We need to watch what's going on in Westminster in terms of who's going to be running the show there. Some very worrying things in that mix. And we also need to be talking to people at the doors in all kinds of conversations. Gosh, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could bring back the upswelling of discussion that we had in 2014? It was amazing. It was. I mean, my town alone, there was something almost every night. There was something going on, some history or some just political discussion of some kind with people. It was really brilliant.
Yeah, it was.
And you can feel there's something building though. I mean, we were at the march on Saturday there up in the top of Carlton Hill, and it was buzzing. There was a lot of young people on that march, which really gave me hope. That's what we need to do to bring young people along with us, because they're the ones who've got the energy to get up that hill.
Oh, we managed it.
We made it because we're not going to give up. But that's maybe a nice positive note to end on. That is the bottom line for us, isn't it? What kind of country do we want to be, and how are we going to get there? The way you've described that society and everything, that's absolutely the kind of country I want. So yes,
absolutely. And your point about the young people, like we've got more young people now who didn't get a chance to vote in 2014. And so I think that's another case for the argument that we need another referendum, this once in a generation argument. So I think more young people recognise that Scotland needs that independence so that we can actually get on with what we need to do and design a society and a culture that fits for Scotland.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, thank you very much. And good luck with the campaign. We know it's 40 days. Get out there and get it done.
Got a lot of ground to cover as well. You must really clock up the miles when you're out.
Oh, yes, and I've tried to do most of it by public transport. I've discovered Ember, the electric buses.
Great. I use them.
Yes. What is it about them? They're just amazing. I don't know what it is.
It's so easy to use as well. A little app you could just book it 10 minutes before. Yeah,
that's right. Exactly. And they're rolling one out. I think they're rolling they've got direct to Fort William, so I'm going, well, not direct, but I'm off to, so I'll be in Edinburgh in a few weeks for a hustings, and then from Edinburgh I'm going to Glencoe, and I'm going to campaign in Ballachulish, Glencoe and Kinlochleven, and then go up to Fort William, stay overnight and campaign in Fort William, then on up to Drumnadrochit and Bewley, and then home, and then there's a few other loops like that. But yeah, the Ember bus is helping me get around.
Excellent. We're not sponsored by Ember, we should say, but but we appreciate the service. So thank you so much.
Yeah, really lovely to meet you both and have this chat. And thanks for your work that you're doing to keep these discussions live. It's really important.
So again, another really interesting discussion. Hope you agree. There's a lot in what Ariane had to say there. And don't forget, between now and polling day, we're going to be doubling up on our podcast, 2 podcasts a week. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening on YouTube, you can click the little bell and you get a reminder whenever we put out a new episode, which is every Friday.
And sign up for our mailing list. You can do that from the website. And we always send one out at the beginning of each month to tell you what's happening. Last but not least, you can buy us a coffee on coffee.com.
And we'll catch you later. Bye now.